So 50% of our time is our exploration when we do the travel part, the fun part, and the other 50% is kind of the boring part where we will work on our project.
Welcome to The Fi Show, where you get a behind-the-scenes look into financial independence. Here's your host, Cody and Justin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Fi Show. We took a little bit of a hiatus, but we're back and better than ever. Justin, what's going on in your world?
Well, we're kind of sitting here, leading into the final holidays, the final end of this year. And looking back on it, I know it's obviously been a tough year for a lot of people, but it's been an interesting year personally. And I kind of feel like I'm finally starting to hit my groove from the move to Austin, starting to see those expenses kind of come down to where I thought they would. I'm getting settled in. We got the apartment renovated. So it just kind of feels like we're finally getting in the groove of things, and excited about the vaccine news coming out and hopefully getting to start, traveling a lot more next year. I think I've started setting dates in my mind for when I'd be ready to kind of pull the plunge and become fully retired. So, just a lot of things kind of coming to a head, and I'm starting to see a lot of traction and kind of see the end of the tunnel there. So it's a cool time. I feel like normally our updates are a lot of like, oh, this trip we went on, that trip we went on. Obviously things are a little different this year. So mostly been, hitting up a few places in the car. I have driven home back to Mississippi, and I'll do that again for Christmas. But honestly, the biggest thing I'm pumped for is got myself a paddleboard for Christmas, a stand-up paddleboard. And so there's all these cool local spots around Texas, different streams and lakes that is going to, kind of going to be our outlet for travel until the vaccine comes around and we can go back to normal.
What's that river called right in the center of Austin? What am I thinking of? No, that's Austin. Yeah. Yeah.
So you have, technically it's the Colorado River is dammed up in a few different places. And so they call it like Lady Bird Lake is the section right in front of my house down here, downtown Austin. And then you've got, a lot of different places across Texas. The Guadalupe is a really popular one for people to go floating and stuff. But there's a lot of cool little areas where you can take the paddleboard out that I'm excited about. But how about you, Cody?
Yeah, I've been really, really busy. So as people who, listen to the podcast frequently, I moved in September down to central Connecticut. And my girlfriend Lauren and I actually just moved back up to Massachusetts in the beginning of December. So two moves in 3 months isn't the funnest thing ever, but now we're kind of settled. I'm hitting my groove too, which is really nice. Been spending a lot of time. I know I'd mentioned I think it was the 2020 Roundup episode, Justin. I mentioned the properties, and I had, bought these 2 duplexes. One was a multifamily down in Connecticut. Been spending a lot of time on those, just like updating, renovating, getting them rented out. I think they're like 95% of the way there. And I have, 2 of the units rented, but it's just been a lot of work on the real estate front. I also actually just picked up I guess you could call it a part-time job. But so my friend Grant, who I went on the book tour with, Grant Sabatier, his website just got acquired by the Motley Fool like last month or maybe 2 months ago. And so he kind of brought me on board, and now I'm working on their content team with content strategy, monetization, stuff like that, since I have experience with, my own brands and my own site. So yeah, that's exciting. I started that last week. So I've been doing that like part-time right now. I don't know if that's going to develop into something bigger, but like I said, yeah, just been staying busy, kind of grinding. It's a lot easier to pick up all these new things and try all these new adventures when, like you said, Justin, we can't travel. Last year at this time, I was in South America, and this year I'm just sitting at home. So that's pretty much everything with me. I think we should probably dig into today's guest, because that is the real star of the show, and that's Mr. Nomad Numbers. And so this is a guy who's just always had the travel bug. He always knew he loved to travel. And once he kind of pulled the trigger a couple of years ago, he just started to travel hop. He'd do 6 to 8 week stints in all different places around the world. He actually keeps a really detailed log on his blog showing the different numbers, what it's going to cost if he prorated that out for the entire year. Talks about slow travel, talks about minimalism, travel hacking, cooking their meals, like everything you could think about when it comes to like finance and frugality, traveling the world for super cheap. Like so many of us in the FI community know, but it is an unknown thing to so many people.
Yeah, this episode is unique in a couple different ways. I mean, we're really trying to dig into Geo-arbitrage, and you'll see that with, the little series that we're doing. But I never really had heard anyone bring up Taiwan as a place for Geo-arbitrage. It was never one of the common ones that I see listed around. Like you see Thailand all the time, or you see different parts of maybe a Mexico or a country like that. But I just never heard of Taiwan as a country that somebody was using for geo-arbitrage. So that was interesting. And then deeper into Taiwan, like just, when we are in this kind of odd time with the pandemic, and we see how things are being handled in our country, just to see what is it actually like in a different country. Not like, okay, you read about some news article and you're not really sure how accurate it is, like, but talking to someone who's been through it and hearing the differences, some good and some bad. It sounds like they've had a lot of success as far as containment, but then there's also these different angles of like, oh wow, like, the things that they had people doing there would maybe be culturally tough for some folks in the United States. But and then the other thing I really loved about Mr. Nomad Numbers is just the numbers part. Like, he really does a great job on his website of putting a lot of great, actual numbers out there with maps, and where you can really dig in and see what this would be like if it was something you wanted to consider.
Totally agree with that, Justin. And so if you're someone who's thinking about living abroad, traveling abroad, he really gets into the weeds. He talks about getting the Taiwan Gold Card to establish 3 years residency and a bunch of other cool tips and tricks that may be applicable to you. But first, let's take a quick moment for our partner. Keeping track of your net worth is one of the most important things you can do on your journey to financial independence. If you don't have an idea of what your net worth is, there's no way that you can keep your quote-unquote score. One of our favorite tools to keep this score is called Personal Capital. If you haven't already started using it, it's an online software that basically compiles all of your data, it crunches all your assets, all your liabilities, and spits out a net worth number and allows you to track it day by day, month by month.
Yeah, Cody, one of the big things that hold people back when they're doing activities like tracking their expenses or tracking their net worth is just they look at it as a big burden. And this allows you to go in with one username and one password and access as many financial accounts as you have. These can be loans, these can be 401ks, these can be HSAs, bank accounts, credit cards. They're all linked there. The other thing I really like about Personal Capital is it's very investing focused. So you can go in there and look at your allocation across your entire portfolio. So you don't just look at your allocation in one type of account, but your allocation as a person completely. And if you want to use the same tool that me and Cody use to track our net worth, which is completely free, you can do so at thefishow.com/PC. That's thefishow.com/PC. We think you're really going to enjoy this episode. There's going to be a lot of great content there. And if you want to kind of read along with some notes as you listen to the episode, you can do that at thefishow.com/nomadnumbers. That's thefishow.com/nomadnumbers.
No, so I think it started with the love for travel. Both my wife and I both had the travel bugs in our past life. So that's what came first. And then as we wanted to travel, so, okay, let me take a step back. So it all started with me meeting my wife in California in 2016. And as we were starting to date, we were having this kind of big conversation about our relationship. And in one day when we went hiking, we discussed about, why not going to travel for a full year, taking 1 year off to travel. And we say, oh yeah, that sounds good. But I was asking my wife, why not traveling for 2 or 3 years? Because we were looking at the cost of the travel and we realized that it was actually not as expensive as she thought. She grew up in California, so she was American, and she thought that traveling for a year was going to cost her something like $100,000 to hit a few countries. And growing up in Europe, I knew it was going to be much cheaper. So we're starting there. We realized that, let's look at the cost. And then from there, we stumbled about people that were doing it indefinitely. And then that's where we stumbled about the rabbit hole, about the financial independence people like Christian Braz, as you guys have on your show, that have been doing it. So slow travel became first, and then financial independence.
It feels like the sentiment that your wife has is very similar to what a lot of people have, which is where they put this high bar. They think it's really expensive to travel. I'm just curious, what do you think are some of the mental hurdles that people put in front of themselves that aren't real? Like, what is it that people are thinking incorrectly that makes them feel like travel is so expensive?
Well, so I think that's a good question. I think it depends on your culture and where you come from. I think for me, again, growing up in France, the cost of travel was X. And so when I moved to the US, and when I see that cost of traveling doubling or tripling just by looking at cost to put a 2 weeks package together, for me it was like, that seems very expensive, because I knew that it could be cheaper. So if you grew up in the US and this is how much you think a 2 weeks vacation is going to cost, like, you might not question that. Also, the other thing is that in the US, because with the limited time that you have to take time off, you might just be able to travel for 1 week or 2 weeks. So you want to package as much as you can during the short amount of time to enjoy, to get the most out of your vacation, which will also inflate the price as well. So I think those are some of the two elements that I think people sometimes don't try to challenge.
So, Mr. NN, I know you mentioned that slow travel kind of came before financial independence, but most people who have a love for travel, they meet in 2016, can't just go and start traveling the world a couple of years later. You must have been doing something pretty right with your money. Could you just talk a little bit about your financial situation, maybe in 2016 when you and your wife met?
Yeah, so I think at the time when we met, we didn't know what financial independence was, but we were doing all of the things that put us in a path to actually reach FI. I think we are pretty much FI by the time we've met. I think it's in 2017 that we started looking at our numbers and we say, oh yeah, we are already ready. So we didn't have really to do anything else rather than some optimization, because I think our portfolio and real estate were, our portfolio was mostly invested into tech stocks, and we can dig into that if you guys want. But yeah, so we're already at FI. It's just that being, I guess, maybe frugal in one sense of not trying to really spend more than we needed, and being a little bit of minimalist as well, put us already on that trajectory. So I moved to the US in 2010, when soon after I graduated from France. So basically in 2008, shortly after I moved from France. So from 2008 to 2017, it was almost 10 years. And I think our saving rate was already at 50% at the beginning, and I think we probably ended up close to 80%. So without knowing, we're doing the right thing.
Now, obviously, not everyone listening to the show is maybe on a super accelerated path to FI. Maybe they're still several years out from it. But I know you've got some things around, that you don't necessarily have to wait until you're financially independent to actually start this. So I'm just I'd like to get some of your thoughts on how is it that people can sprinkle in some of the things that you've learned before they do have 6 months to a year where they can just travel. Maybe they only have maybe they could put together a month or a few weeks at a time.
Yeah, so I think for us, as you guys ask, what came first? What came first was not the financial independence, it was the soul travel, because at the core, it was something we were excited about. So I think people should think about what do they want out of their life, and then trying to remove all of the constraints, all of the limitation. For us, when we decided, we say we love travel and we want to travel, we are not trying to think in the back of our mind, oh, well, we need to save money, what's going to happen to our job, to the place we are living. So we started with the end goal, where we wanted to go, and then taking the step back to engineer the plans to get there. So people don't have to be FI, as you said. You can tap into Geo-arbitrage and be able to live in a lower cost of country location and just work, for instance, 6 months out of the year if you can have a location independent job as well. So that can be one option. We've met people which have negotiated expat contracts. So basically, right now in Taipei, some people are from the UK. They came here. Instead of having the two people working, the husband or the spouse is working. The other person is staying at home, taking care of the kids if they have kids, or doing anything else, because the cost of living is much cheaper. Their salary is the same than they were used to have before they back in the UK. And usually those contracts come with free accommodation. So those are like just two examples of when you can spin things in a way that it's doable before you reach financial independence. We just see financial independence for us not at the end goal, but just as a tool that you use to be able to make things easier. So as I said, there was many ways to get there.
Love that, and absolutely agree. So I kind of want to hop back, let's do a little time warp to June of 2018, when you and your wife you decide that you're going to embark on this nomadic journey. Could you talk a little bit about the months leading up to that? What made you want to embark on this nomadic journey? Were you going to just cut your income to zero? Were you going to drastically cut your expenses? I'd love to talk a little bit about the mindset and then some of the tacticianing that you're doing behind the scenes to get ready for something like that. Because I'm sure we have a lot of listeners who may be FI or may be pretty close to FI and have the numbers all lined up. But taking a leap like that can be really scary if you don't have the right tools in your pocket.
So I think the first things we did was we did a lot of research. We started by, like I said, we stumbled about, I think, some of the first articles we stumbled on were the blog from Christian Bryce, then the Mad Scientist podcast on the Fi Space as well, just to get an idea about how people can invest their money. Because remember, right, we were both chipping our money because we both work in tech, so we were able to invest in tech stocks just for the company we are working with. So I was just accumulating a lot of money. I think I was putting 15% of my salary each month into the stock of the company I was working with back in 2008. And over almost 10 years, you can imagine that that's a lot of money that you start accumulating. And the market doing so well since 2008, that's a lot of gain as well. But that was not the right investment and the safest. So then we learned the simple path to wealth from Jim Collins. And then we also went to one of the Chautauqua that Jim Collins was organizing, those retreats in Ecuador. That's where we met Christian Bryce there. We met Pete, Mr. Money Mustache, and a few bloggers that we've been following on that space. And that was kind of the last kind of our epiphany moment when we say, okay, we did all of the research up front. We've met those people, and there was like 20 of us, 20 attendees in that small retreat that were trying to reach financial independence and do things with that. That was kind of the final validation for us. It's like, okay, now everything that we've learned makes sense. This is not like some kind of a big scheme that are people trying to, just make money out of their blogs. So that sounds solid. So we did adjustment into our portfolio in terms of shifting all of our heavily tech stock into low-cost index funds, like the traditional 4% type of investment. And then we diversified with some real estate. And after that, it was not all about taking action to, how do we get out? What do we do with our jobs? What do we do with our apartment in San Francisco? So for that, we were fine into downsizing. Like I said, we kind of really embraced minimalism. So we went through it took us maybe 6 months to downsize our apartments to pretty much very little. So then we can get noticed, move a couple of, I think we have 3 or 4 moving bugs that we bring to Mrs. Nomad Numbers family. And then, I had to quit my job because I could not keep my job. Mrs. Nomad Numbers has that location independent job. So for her, keeping her job was not a problem. And then she will realize that, now that we can travel because of Geo-arbitrage, she will be able to keep a pretty high, she will actually get basically a 2x increase in her income because our saving rate was even much higher if we started by going to places with Canada and Mexico. So she kept her job for 9 months to try things out. And then, on July 1st, we were ready to go. We gave notice to my job, to our apartment. And that's pretty much how we did it.
So that's a great lead up into how you got ready to go on this journey. But can you actually tell us a little bit about some of the places you've been, what that journey looked like, how long you were gone for? Are you still gone? That sort of thing.
Yeah, so we're still ongoing. Right now we are in Taiwan, but because of the pandemic. We started because Mrs. Nomad Number was still working. We started we have to stay within the American time zone. So we mostly stay in visiting the America. So Canada, North America for 3 months. We love to slow travel as well. So for us, we like to move in one place at least 4 to 6 weeks at a time. So we did 3 months in Canada, and that was mostly in Quebec, when we spent the first month in Montreal, the last month in Quebec City, and the month in between, we took my family, to do a road trip around Quebec. And then we spent about 100 days or 3 months and a half in Mexico. So we did Puerto Vallarta, Mexico City, Oaxaca, and San Miguel de Allende. Again, about at an average of 4 weeks a month. And then Mrs. Nomad Number started getting a little bit tired of me enjoying all of my free time and her having to work. So she decided, no, because technically I don't really need to have that job. And that job was really fun at the beginning. She said, okay, I'm just going to quit. And then we decided to go to Aruba. Actually, we went to Aruba, and that's when she decided to quit, because Aruba is that beautiful island in the Caribbean. We stayed there for a month, when usually people will spend 1 week or 2 for their honeymoon because it's kind of expensive, but we managed to pull it for a full 4 weeks for, I think, less than $3,000 for the entire month, which was pretty high in our monthly spending, but for the location, it's still pretty cheap. I think people will have probably spent 10 grand in 1 or 2 weeks there. So that was Aruba. And then she really said, oh no, I think I want to also enjoy, I think that beach, those sunsets, I think I really need to enjoy most of it instead of being stuck at home and working on my laptop. So went to Aruba and then came back to visit our family back in California. And that's how we ended up year 1. And then for year 2, we spent Europe and Southeast Asia. So in Europe, we went to France, Spain, Portugal, Montenegro. And then that's led us until the fall of 2019. And then we went to Southeast Asia. So we did 2 months in Thailand. And then we went to Malaysia, Vietnam, Indonesia. And then we have to go. That's where the pandemic hit. So we decided to go and shelter ourselves to Taiwan, when we've been since then.
Wow. Well, you have just been all over, and I'm actually looking at your travel app that you have on your website right now, and it's a beautiful map of all the places you've been. A question I have, so on each location here, just like on the main page, it says the cost of living it would be for a year. And it looks like you prorated this out because you spent about 4 weeks or more in each location.
Yeah.
Now, how does the quality of living compare to the cost of living? Is it like on a linear scale, the lower the cost of living, the lower the quality of living? Or I'd love if you could weigh in on some of these, because I'm sure we'll put this in the show notes so people can check out this page for themselves. But what should people expect when they see a place that costs $16,000 a year versus a place that costs $50,000 a year? Is it going to be 3 times worse of a quality of life?
No, so actually that's the power of geo-arbitrage. It can be the opposite. So I mentioned Aruba, and Aruba is definitely on the higher ends because I think we spent, adjusted to a year, I think it's probably 35,000 if I remember correctly. So that's a nice beach location. You can imagine like a beautiful sunset every day, good weather. But you can get the same thing if you go to Thailand. We went to Koh Lanta, which is a beautiful beach town for a fraction of that cost. I think living in Koh Lanta for the year would have been for us like 15,000 a year. So we get a nice Airbnb, so we love Airbnbs. We have access to a nice fresh farmers market, so we could get fresh produce, access to the beach every morning. We usually like to go there to get a swim, do some meditation, and then kick off the day. So don't think that because the cost of living is low, your life is going to be terrible and cheap. Chiang Mai is another example. It's also in the bottom of our range, but we managed to get a very luxury condo for, I think it was $600 a month, just for 4 weeks of a luxury condo, which has a gym, which has AC, which is very modern. We have our swimming pool outside. So yeah, it's quite the opposite. That's why the tagline of our blog is the cost of travel is cheaper than staying at home. And that's what happened to us. I think we slash our expenses by at least 50% by leaving San Francisco as we were able to travel.
I was just going to ask real quick, just as a frame of reference, how much were you spending in San Fran? Just so we can give people a number.
Yeah, about 50 to 60, I think I would say, per year.
And one thing we love to do is to give people, at least just like if they listen to an episode, they get one thing. They get like one thing to look into. And you've been to all these amazing places. If someone was looking at this or listening to this episode and thinking, I want to check out a place that has, pretty good infrastructure as far as like hospitals and internet, and then they wanted a low cost of living, is there one place that really comes to mind that people could go and research?
So I think I will have give you a different answer before COVID. I think with COVID, I will say Taiwan, because all of those, before COVID, I would have said probably Chiang Mai or Bali. I think Chiang Mai will be by far the best in terms of infrastructure. But now, because of COVID, we are thinking also as well as access to healthcare, stability with the government, and all of those countries as a foreigners haven't been always as nice with their foreigners, actually, while Taiwan has been amazing. So, and the cost of living are not that far. I think Chiang Mai will be like 16,000 a year. Taiwan, I think, is going to be for us 22 so far with the expenses we've put, so pretty similar. And here, the healthcare is amazing. It's very affordable. The infrastructure is it's like a cheaper version of Japan. Very good public transportation. We've never used a car with buses and subways and train. You can go anywhere. They have the high-speed rail. So yeah, Taipei for sure.
So how did you discover Taiwan? Like, it seems like, and we'll definitely gonna dig into this because it just seems like Taiwan is an absolute gold mine. But I'm guessing it was extensive research. You guys are both in tech. You guys both seem like you're research savvy. Was that all it was? Was it just looking up like, best places to live for X, Y, and Z, and Taiwan just checked all the boxes, or?
Well, I think it's research and luck because nobody knew about COVID. So remember, we were in Indonesia in between mid-Feb. We're supposed to be in Indonesia from mid-February to mid-March, to end of March. The pandemic hit like mid-March. So now like we went quickly like into almost panic mode, like, oh, what do we do? But so instead of going back to the US, because if you remember at the time, the family of my wife are in California, so the West Coast starting getting hit, Seattle and all of those places turning a little bit reddish. So we decided, okay, let's look around any place in the world because as long-term travelers, we can basically go anywhere. And Taiwan has the lower numbers at that time. I think we were looking at Taiwan, Singapore, and Malaysia and Australia. Australia because my wife been there, so she was familiar with it as well, and Singapore, and Malaysia because we just spent time in Malaysia and the health care seems to be pretty good and with the cost of living. We ended up with Taiwan because it was the lowest numbers, and the day prior to departure, I think Malaysia were doing like bad things, like having massive gathering in Kuala Lumpur, which led to one of their biggest outbreak and put them into a bit of trouble towards COVID. So yeah, that's how we ended up with Taiwan. To date, to give you guys numbers, I think Taiwan has less than just about 600 cases total, 7 deaths in total. And that's not just for today, it's like since the beginning. And they haven't got, most of those cases are imported from people that can come inside the territory, like residents mostly that want to come back. There hasn't been any local transmission of the virus locally within Taiwan for more than 200 days. Which is crazy and unaware of. So so that's why we've been lucky because when we came to Taiwan, we didn't know that it was going to be that good and how well the country was going to react and manage their border and their quarantine policy. But yeah, for now, it's like that's why we're encouraging our friends in the US. There is a way for you to get a visa and residency like we did. So if you guys, if anyone is interested, that's what we're also promoting on the blog, and we can discuss more with you guys on that. Is like, you get so much, especially in that time of pandemic, by living here.
That's actually what my next question was going to be is, you've been in Taiwan for a while. It sounds like you're not looking to leave anytime soon. Most of the time when I think of going to a different country, my first question is, well, how do I stay there longer than 6 months or 3 months or however long the visa is good for? So how are you able to stay there as long as you have? How long can you stay there? Like, how complicated is it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so usually in normal condition, when borders are open, people will just do visa run. So in Taiwan, you get 3 months upon arrival as American and European. And then you can extend up to 6 months by just going to the local immigration and paying a small fee. After that, you have to leave the country. So a lot of people prior to that were just basically going in and out of the country. And Taiwan has still been okay with that. I think countries with Thailand, for instance, the visa are much shorter. And if you do those visa run, you will get flagged. And some people have been banned for entering the country. So in general, this is not a practice we like to do ourselves. But now with COVID, you cannot do that anymore because the border in Taiwan are still closed to foreigners. So we started looking at options, and we discovered that Taiwan has what they call the employment gold card visa program, which a visa that can give you residency for up to 3 years, and it's to attract skilled foreigners to come into the country. So just for the background, if you want to find a job in Taiwan as a non-Taiwanese, it's a little bit like in the US as an immigrant. Like for me, when I moved to the US, I had to interview for a company. That company gave me a visa to enter the country. So the same applied to Taiwan. You need to find a job first, then that company will sponsor you for a visa, and then when you leave that company, you will lose your visa as well. So that gold card was a way for foreigners to come to the country first and then to be able to apply for a job. So the country is looking for specific sets of foreigners who have specific skills. And then if your application is approved, then they give you that visa for up to 3 years.
Awesome. Yeah, I did some digging, and it looks like Taiwan isn't the only country that does something like this, where if you're in a specific industry and you have X income, then you can come live here for X, Y, or Z number of years. And it obviously depends, but it's just cool hearing like your specific situation with Taiwan. I do want to ask though, as a resident, so you don't have a passport from Taiwan or anything as a resident, what are some of those rights? Like, do you get all the health care? Do you get permits into neighboring countries? Do you have visitation? Like, can you have people come visit you? I'd love to hear like how you are viewed in the eyes of the Taiwanese government.
Yeah, so again, the Taiwanese government has been, as we enter the country as foreigners, there's been already really, really nice to them. Because they keep extending the visa, the free visa we enter on has been still being extended as we are recording that episode. So they are so the people that if we will have arrived back in March, we could have still legally be able to stay because every month they do extend that as they understand that the world out there it's not really safe. So when we are discussing about which country do you think are safe, and I've put those warning in countries like Taiwan or Indonesia. Those countries have been very friendly with their foreigners, and some of our friends that been there, some of them have to leave and go back home after the first 3 or 6 months period. So when it comes to the gold visa, it's the same. They are really nice, and they give you pretty much the best of the best. So you get a resident visa that give you the ability to be resident and stay in the country. You get an alien resident certificate. So that's basically the card that show you that's the equivalent of your passport. So with that, you can enter the country. You have multiple entry permits, so you can come in and out. Even during the pandemic, they will still let you back in. You have an open work permit. So not only you can work for a Taiwanese company, but you can work for any company or for yourself. You have the ability to apply for the national healthcare, which is pretty good. Is the official insurance here in Taiwan. It's really cheap. It has no deductible, and the cost on a monthly basis, it's around less than 30 USD. So that's pretty good especially if you compare it with the system in the US.
Oh yeah.
You also have the ability to bring your spouse and your kids. So if you have a spouse, you can just have yourself to apply and have that person to become your dependent. You can also invite your grandparents and parents, so basically all of your descendants, to visit the country. So that's what we plan to do with my parents. So then they can come visit instead of us having going to Europe. And there is also some tax break that you can enjoy as you come here as well. That I don't have too much, but that's kind of the 8 main benefits that you get from that card.
So you've given us a breakdown of, how you're able to physically be in Taiwan, some of the positive things there. But if we actually start to break down what the costs kind of coming from and how that compared to your life in the United States, I mean, what are the different areas that lead to your, I think you said somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 a year. I mean, is most of the savings just coming from housing and everything else is similar to the United States, or is it cheaper across the board? What's a general breakdown of your budget?
So I'm just looking at our app because that's where all of the data are. So as of now, so since with all of the expense from March all the way to the end of November, about 50% of our budget is into accommodation. So just to show you how cheap the life here, because usually in average we spend, so the big 3 are accommodation, transportation as food, as you guys know, and usually we do 1/3 in accommodation. But right now, we've been spending about 50% or $9,000 into accommodation for that 8 months period. So $9,000, and then after that it's groceries, food, and then after that it's transportation. So it's way cheaper. We spend about $1,000 a month in rent here, and we have nice. It's like 1-bedroom size apartments in a very good location in Taipei. And Taipei is also the most expensive place because it's the capital. But so accommodation is not that expensive compared to definitely compared to California and some high cost of living in the US. And then the food, it's dramatically cheaper, as well as the local transportation. And that's how I ended up with those 22,000 roughly.
So what type of lifestyle do you guys live? Are you mostly just, hanging in every night, cooking dinner, getting the cheapest groceries possible? Are you the boring people that everyone talks about in the FI community, or what do you do on most of your days or weeks?
Yeah, so I think for us, it's, we practice what we call slow travel, and it's also slow travel and slow living. So we just see travel as, instead of working to travel is our lifestyle. So So yeah, the day-to-day might looks a bit boring. I think I will categorize it so we usually split our time 50-50. So 50% of our time is our exploration when we do the travel part, the fun part, and the other 50% is kind of the boring part, where we will work on our project, our hobbies, stay home, do the cooking, and all of that. We do in general eat most of our meal at home. That's correct, and we like to live like local. So yeah, if you will imagine living here for a year or even a month or more, we just go out, find our nice farmers market with fresh produce, just buy whatever is in season, go back home, cook some of that meal. We usually go out a couple of times a week though. So the food in Asia and Southeast Asia, it's super cheap. So actually most people here are not even cooking. For us, because we focus on our health, we just like to know what goes into our body, and the street food or the food outside, it's always never control, the oil and all of that. So I think that's why. But I think here in Asia, it's one of in countries like Taiwan and Southeast Asia in particular, it's all of those few exceptions where it's probably cheaper for you to go out every day. We just decide not to do that. So not for the saving part, but like I said, for the health part. So we do that. So the 50% of the time when we go explore, Taiwan is a bit different than usual because we have been stuck here for a long time. But so what we'll do, we will alternate between two or 3 months living in Taipei and 1 month exploring around Taiwan. We'll do more like a fast travel. So we just did that back in October when we took 4 weeks. We went to Kenting, which is the south of Taiwan, which is a nice beach town. We went to Green Island, which is a nice island for some scuba diving and snorkeling. We went to Hualien on the east coast to do some biking. We did a 3-day bike ride when we bike 200 kilometers, so maybe 120 miles or so to explore the east coast. Taiwan is a very beautiful country by bike, and the bike infrastructure is amazing. So so those are some of the things we do. We kind of try to alternate between the slow travel and the fast travel, and we do some of the boring things too.
So since you're living the slow travel, type lifestyle, and you're getting to live more like a local, and now you've explored a lot, as we are still in this COVID-19 kind of era, and you mentioned like how successful they've been, what is it you've noticed about whether it be the culture, the infrastructure, what the government did? What is it that you think made them so successful at handling the virus?
So people will listen to the governments by the T, and they will wear masks. I think I think that's what probably helped them being so good. I think when I look at the news from countries in Europe, like states in the United States, I think it's much harder for those countries to have kind of a mandate. But here it's pretty much a mandate. When the government say, hey, you need to wear mask indoor, people are going to wear mask indoor. You need to social distance yourself. People will social distance themselves. We haven't been experiencing that since, I think, April. They've been relaxing all of those rules. I think right now, the rules is to only wear mask in public transportation and in some grocery stores. So we haven't been wearing masks pretty much that much. But people will definitely wear masks in the streets, even though it's not required. It's very common to see most of people wearing masks in the streets. They just follow what the government is doing. Right now, as the winter is coming, I think as of December 1st, they're going to require people to again wear masks indoor when it was not required before, just as the flu is coming and just as a precaution. Even though there is nobody with the virus, I think the government wants to be extremely precautious instead of potential outbreak or something bad happen. At least they want to control things. So that's one thing. The other thing is that their quarantine process is really, really good. So when we enter, to share a bit about our experience, when we get to the airport, we actually at the time we didn't know the quarantine was going to be mandatory for us. We were just going to self-quarantine, but they changed the rules as we arrived because the news at that time were changing every day. So they asked for our phone numbers as we go through the immigration. They make sure they could call our phone numbers. They did that on the spot. And then they asked us for our address, where we are going to stay, and they ask us not to take any public transportation. So you only have to take private transportation, so taxi or Uber to get to your place. And after that, starting the first day, there is like police officers that were checking on us every day. I think it's the local police that just check on everybody in quarantine. So I didn't know that I could not really go out of the apartment. I know I could not leave the apartment itself. I didn't know I could not leave the building. I knew I could not leave the building. I didn't know I could not leave the apartment. So when there was someone that was ringing the bell, because I just basically, we were in a second floor in that condo. So I went downstairs and I opened the door with that person wearing my mask, and he'd say, "Hey, who are you?" And I say, "Oh, this is me." But I say, "Oh, what are you doing here? Please come back to your apartment." And he did that in a nice way. But they were making sure, check on us to make sure we were in the apartment, we are following the quarantine. Then they asked us to change our phone to a local SIM card, so then they could track our location as well, which is pretty common here. So that way, if people are leaving the apartment, the local authority will find them within minutes because of geolocation. So with that, they are just able to make sure that people are doing the quarantine for 2 weeks. And every day they will ping you and asking you, usually through text message, are you okay? You have to take your temperature. So are you okay or not? And if you're not okay, they will just take care of you and if you need hospitalization. But then after the 14 days, if you are good, then you are free to go. And then you don't need to you just follow the local rules, and that's pretty much it. So I think that has been helping. And that's why those 600 plus or minus cases I've mentioned came from just all of those people that came. Because they follow the quarantine, they can, identify them. If they need treatment, they go to take to hospital, isolated, and then the virus is not spreading for them. So I think that has been very good as well, the quarantine process here.
Wow, that is so different than the U.S., and I'm sure you're aware of that. But that's crazy. I mean, just probably thinking like a U.S. person. Wow, but obviously they're doing something right and they're handling this. And obviously COVID has thrown a wrench in everyone's travel plans. I know I've missed out on a ton of travel. Justin's missed out on a ton of travel. You've probably missed out on a ton of travel yourself, Mr. NN. What's next after COVID? Do you have another destination in mind? Do you have all these destinations that you wish you could have gone in 2020 that maybe are on the horizon for 2021?
So I'll take a step back. So we wanted, when we decided slow travel versus financial independence and all of that, I think what we wanted for us is to spend time to travel and also spend more time with family. Because as I've moved from France to the US in 2008, I was like 6,000 miles away from them. So with more limited vacation, I could not see them more than once every 18 months. So I'm more like, now I want to spend more time with them. My parents are like recently retired and they're still healthy. So so the next plan for us was each year we want to spend 1 month with our relative family. So I was going to take my parents to Japan that should have been in April. We canceled that, so I'm hoping to be able to take them hopefully next year to come visit us in Taiwan. And after their quarantine, we can spend some quality time with them. But after that, we wanted to spend more time in Europe. We really enjoy Europe. And we also want to spend more time in Southeast Asia because it was my first time in South Asia country was the last fall of 2019. The only country I've been was Japan, which was part of Asia. So I've never been to Southeast Asia. And as I told you guys, it's really affordable and you get a really good quality of living. So we're thinking still traveling around. We have a lot of plans. We want to do one of our big goals is to cross the US with an RV, to hit all of the national parks. But to get to that, we want to have an experience with an RV. So I think maybe we can start with New Zealand for maybe a month or two, and maybe Australia to get us familiar with that and see if we can do that on the long term. Mrs. Nomad Numbers is also into sustainable living. So we're also trying to look as we travel those countries for the next few years, trying to find a place that will be our home, because slow traveling is nice, but I think having a community and it's also very important. And as you move every month, it's really hard to have any sort of community. Now that we have been in Taiwan for almost 9 months, we can start building that. But having that permanent home might be a good way for us to establish that community. So we'll be looking into finding what that place looks like, and ideally purchasing a property there as our home and while still traveling. But that's kind of the short and long-term plan that we have in mind for us right now.
Well, Mr. Nomad Numbers, we really appreciate you coming on the show today, but there's so much good information that you have out there. There's no way we could cover it all. You've been to so many places. You're so thorough with the numbers, a lot of really great data. So if somebody wants to dig really deep into that and just nerd out on all the data you've collected, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, so I think the best place for people to come is just to come visit our blog at nomadnumbers.com. And if they want to get in touch with us, just get to our newsletter so they can follow our adventure along the way.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again so much for coming on, and I'm sure that a ton of listeners will get a ton of value.
And as always, if you want to check out our Facebook group page, you can do so at thefishow.com/community. And we always appreciate those 5-star reviews. They help us get great guests like we had today. And if you're interested in supporting The Fi Show, you can do so by checking out some of our partners over at the resources page, which can be found at thefishow.com/resources. And thanks for listening.